All right, so today we are going over the notes for slope. So, what I want you to do first is I want you to look at each of these tables and try to figure out a pattern that's happening in each table. So, pause your video now and do that now. So, hopefully, at the end of this, you found out that the following patterns were happening. So, for this one, every time x went up by 3, y went down by 3. And we see that happen throughout the entire thing. Over here, we have as x goes up by 2, y goes up by 3. Over here, as x goes down by 2, y goes down by 3. This one was a little bit easier too. So as x went down by 1, y went up by 1. This one was a little tricky. So as x went up by 2 here, y went up by 1. But then x went up by 4, and y went up by 2. You should have found out that the pattern was, though, that every single time x went up by 2, y went up by 1. So these values are actually directly proportional to one another. And you should have been able to figure that out. So keep these patterns in mind as we go forward. So what I want you to do is look at this graph and try to figure out how is point A going over to point B. And then how is B going to C, C to D, so on and so forth. What is happening on this plane? So do that now. Pause the video and figure it out. What you should have figured out was that point A to B is going up 2 and then over 4, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. From B to C, it goes up 1 over 2. From C to D, same thing, up 1 over 2. And then from A to D, it goes up 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So what we see here is that all of these changes are actually directly proportional to one another, right? 2 and 4 is the same thing as 1 and 2, right? 4 and 8 is the same thing as 1 and 2. So this change is actually consistent throughout the entire line. And if you notice, the line goes up at a constant rate. And so that makes sense, right? I mean, every single time it's going to go up 1 over 1, 2. Up 1 over 1, 2. So on and so forth. So what we call this is slope. So slope essentially is the rise over run. Now, what is the rise? It is the change in y of a line. So to find the change in y, you subtract two y coordinates from each other. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more later. The run is the change in x. So you subtract two x values from one another. And these make up the slope. So the slope is the ratio showing the rate of change in a line. So for this line down here, if we started at this point, we're going up 1, 2. We're rising up. And then we're running over 1. So our rise is 1, 2, 2. And our run is 1 over 1. Right? So our slope is 2 over 1. You can simplify that to just be 2 if you want it to be. So looking at this line now, this table is the same thing as this line. So I'm showing you how to figure out the slope given two different ways. So if I was just given a line, what is the slope? Well, I'm rising up 1, so my rise is 1, and I'm running over 2. Chelsea just won, just in case you guys wanted to know. So I'm running over 2. And so my rise over run is 1 over 2. Over here, I can do it in a different way. So I'm going to subtract two y values to find my change in y. So I did 6 minus 3. You could choose any of these points that you want. I just chose this point and this point. So I did 6 minus 3, 6 minus 3. And then over here on my x's, I subtracted the 4, which went with that 6. So 6 and 4 are right on top of each other. Took that 4 and I subtracted negative 2. So that got me 3. 6 minus 3 is 3. 4 minus negative 2 is the same thing as 4 plus positive 2. And that got me positive 6. And that can be simplified to 1/2. Now, I showed you down here that you could do this slope in a multitude of ways. So in this red one, I took this point and this point. And so I said 4 minus 3 got me 1. I did 0 minus negative 2 got me positive 2. It's the same slope, right? Over here, I'm showing that you don't necessarily have to do 6 minus 3. You could do 3 minus 6, and that's fine, okay? But if you do that, if you do 3 minus 6, 3 minus 6, you need to make sure that you also do negative 2 minus 4. So it has to stay in that same order. So negative 2 minus 4 gets you negative 6. Negative 3 divided by negative 6 gets you positive 1/2. So it's the same slope throughout the entire thing. Now, how would I find the slope if you were just given 2 points? Well, we know that slope, which is symbolized by m, we'll talk about that more later, and that equals rise over run. And so the rise is the change in y, so you subtract your y values. Your run is your change in x, so you subtract your x values. So if I'm given 2 points, I'm going to take this point and subtract this y value, 4, minus this y value, negative 1. So 4 minus negative 1, subtract the negative, gets you 5. Now, over here, I did negative 2 minus 5, and that got me negative 7. So I got negative 5/7 here. Once again, you can reverse that if you want to. So you don't have to do 4 minus negative 1. So I showed you if you did negative 1 minus 4, it got you negative 5 on top. But keep it in that same order. So if you do negative 1 minus 4, make sure you do 5 minus negative 2. So 5 minus negative 2 gets you positive 7. And 5 over negative 7 is the exact same thing as negative 5 over positive 7. These are the same slope here. Okay? Down here, I showed you again, you subtract your y values, you subtract your x values, you get negative 3 over negative 6, you get 1/2. Again, you could do negative 1 minus negative 4 and 3 minus negative 3. It'll get you the same answer. And down here, likewise, you can pause the video and see what I did there if you want to. But I'm going to keep going on. So what I want you to do now, I want you to pause your video and solve these 4 problems out on your piece of paper. So what you should have gotten is, for this one, our rise, we are going down 1. So if our rise is going down 1, we need to represent that as a negative number. So it's going to be negative 1. My run is still positive though, right? I'm going from here, I'm moving to the right. And so my run is going to be positive 1. Negative 1 over positive 1 gets me negative 1. Notice that a negative slope, negative 1, goes down from left to right. Positive slopes, if you looked here, positive slopes, positive 1/2, went up. Negative slopes go down. So that's important to know as well. Number 2, I subtracted my y value, so I chose this point and this point. Or I'm sorry, I chose this point and this point. And so what I did is I did 1 minus 0, 1 minus 0, and I did 3 minus 0, 3 minus 0, and I got 1/3. Over here, I took these points and I subtracted them. So negative 2 minus 3 got me negative 5. Negative 1 minus negative 3 got me positive 2. And so that's my slope for that one. And then same thing down here. I did that same exact thing. Now, I wanted to talk about one more thing before I closed off, and that is horizontal and vertical lines. Now, I know this looks a little bit messy, but you'll see that I've got a blue, purplish line right here. And I've got a red line going vertical. Now, if I've got a horizontal line, you might ask, okay, what is my rise? Well, I'm going to choose 2 random points. I chose this point and this point. Okay, you could choose any point, it doesn't matter. So, my rise from this point to this point is 0, right? I'm not going up, I'm not going down. So, it's just going to be 0. Meanwhile, my run is 1, 2, 3. So, my run is 3. 0 divided by 3 got me 0. So, this horizontal line has a 0 slope. Okay? Now for my red one, my rise, if I just chose these 2 random points, my rise is 1, 2, but my run is 0. I'm not going over whatsoever. And so my slope is going to be 2 over 0. But we all know that you cannot divide by 0. It's impossible. So therefore, the slope of a vertical line is undefined, okay, because you cannot divide by 0. And this rule is constant for any horizontal or vertical line. And so the slope of a horizontal line is always 0. Meanwhile, the slope of a vertical line is always undefined. So those are our notes on slope. If you have any questions, please see your teacher. You can also find a lot of information on this stuff. I think it's chapter 7.4, either that or 7.5. And so that's all you need to know. And I will see you guys later.